Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're taking a look at a phone that 14 years ago I definitely couldn't afford but certainly wanted. Let's take a look at the HTC Desire Z. So it's definitely a very interesting phone, which as you can see has a slide out keyboard, although it doesn't quite slide out. We'll look at that shortly, but this video was kind of inspired by a video that I made 2 years ago, looking at the HTC Legend, almost to the day, in 2022 in May. So I thought, why not revisit some retro phones that I do have? Yes, these smartphones are quite retro now. And let's see what it's like in 2024. Maybe bring back a bit of nostalgia for everyone and see if it was worth it. Was that really a good phone? Let's check it out. So the HTC Desire Z is one of HTC's flagship phones from 2010. It was released in November of 2010, and at the time I was very much still rocking my HTC Magic and certainly hadn't paid that thing off yet, so there was no chance I was upgrading. But I kind of wish I could have been able to. This thing had a 800 megahertz processor, 512 megabytes of RAM, a 3.7-inch 480 by 800 pixel screen, and a 5 megapixel camera around the back, capable of shooting 720p video. This was the height of technology at the time. It came with 1.5 gigabytes of built-in storage, but it also had micro SD card slots, so you could expand that as much as you needed to. It originally came with Android 2.2. The one we have here, though, has the latest software installed, so it's on 2.33 Gingerbread, and it used HTC's Sense UI. All right, let's take a look around the device itself. Obviously, on the front here, we have the screen. In comparison to modern day devices, it is absolutely tiny, but here you go. Speaker grill. There's also a notification LED in the top here. Not really sure when those kind of stopped being on devices, but I always found it a super useful feature to have. It's a shame they don't really do it anymore. You've got your normal, traditional Android buttons along the bottom. They are touch, they're not actual buttons. And then this thing here is a touch kind of trackpad scroll wheel thing. If you know the HTC Magic, it had a physical actual ball that you could scroll. So this is kind of the upgrade, and it's an actual touch thing, and it is also a clicky button. Around the device, we have on the side here, we have a camera button. We have this switch to take off the back plate. On the top, we have the power button. We have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And around on this side, we have the volume rocker and the USB micro port as well. Nothing on the bottom. And then on the back, you've got your camera that we spoke about, LED flash, and then the actual back plate which comes off. And of course, one perk of these old devices, the back just comes off. Inside we have the battery. We have this slot for the SIM card. These are the mini SIMs, are much bigger than they used to be, than they are these days. You can see the full size of it, whereas this little area is what you'd normally have in a modern smartphone. And then you've got your micro SD card slot, which is a weird little like mechanism that kind of slides up, and you can actually see the pins then that it presses against, and then you kind of put it down and lock it into place. Bit of an odd mechanism, but I guess it probably saved some space and kept everything inside there. So pop the battery back in. But of course, the one thing that this device had over any other HTC smartphone really at the time was the unique way in which the keyboard slid out. So instead of just sliding, it actually had a hinge mechanism. There we go, where the screen kind of comes forward and then snaps back. And that's kind of where it gets its Z name from. I'm trying to see if I can get it on the camera, but you can kind of see in there these little hinges. And I always thought that was going to be quite prone to breaking, but I don't really know if they were. But certainly in this model, it's all fine. And then you're presented with 4 rows of keys. And at the time, there was this big debate. Do smartphones need a keyboard? Is it a good thing or not? Personally, I really like them. My next phone actually after my HTC Magic ended up being the Motorola Milestone. So I did move over to a keyboard uh, device after my first smartphone. But this layout is interesting. There's definitely, you've got your full QWERTY layout. Oh, it's just turned itself on. Okay, sure, why not? Very nostalgic sound, I'm sure. While that's all booting up, we can have another look at the keyboard. You've got your full QWERTY keyboard. This is actually a German phone, so you can see some of the extra characters for the Latin alphabet and things like the menu button. But you've got the full QWERTY layout and a load of extra uh, keys as well for different functionality. And certainly at the time, it was still seen very much that, these devices were brilliant for if you were a business person and you needed to send loads of emails. And it was still very much the time of the BlackBerry. So there was a lot of debate about whether this was a useful form factor or not. All right, so that's kind of the look at around the device. Let's have a look at the operating system itself. So as I said, this is running Android 2.3.3, which is Gingerbread, but it has HTC's Sense UI on top. Let me go in and just check the versions. So there you go, Android 2.3.3 and HTC Sense 2.1. And this was very much a time when Android was kind of the Wild West. Lots of phone manufacturers were experimenting with their own skins. Lots of phone manufacturers were experimenting in ways that they could make their device more interesting to the consumer. So it's definitely an interesting time. HTC Sense was always kind of criticized as being very nice looking. It was kind of the pinnacle of smartphone design at the time, but it was very slow. And this, I have literally just wiped this. There's nothing else installed or anything else. And it is not the most responsive. One particular way to tell is if you switch it into keyboard mode, the time it takes to redraw the home screen is quite dismal, to be honest. It's very slow. And this was definitely an issue they were facing. I think their designs were just a little bit too far ahead of what that was actually capable with a single core processor and half a gig of RAM. Still, very interesting nonetheless. And you've kind of got your normal selection of apps, both those that HTC included, things like Amazon, MP3, Facebook, and their built-in clock app, flashlight, FM radio. But you also had all your Google apps as well, so things like Gmail, Google Maps, the Android Marketplace, it wasn't the Play Store yet, and other sorts of built-in things. There was Twitter, and some other apps as well. Now, of course, the problem with a device this old, and specifically Gingerbread, is that Google no longer supports it. Google won't actually allow you to sign into a Google account on this operating system anymore. It just won't work. It is so old that they've deemed that it's a security vulnerability, and understandably so. But what it does mean is it really does limit what you can actually do with this device. So we are going to have a look and kind of see what we could do with this. But I think the first things first, I want to check out the camera and see what kind of quality we can get from that. So here's the camera quality on the HTC Desire Z and the microphone quality as well, shooting at glorious 720p at 5 megapixels. It's not great, is it? This was definitely a time before really video came into its own on mobile phones. There isn't a front-facing camera. It's not really expected that you're going to be doing a lot of photography and videos with it, but we are getting into that social time now. So this is one of those devices that's kind of the turn of this trend, and I think actually one of the last devices that doesn't have a front-facing camera. With that in mind, let's have a look at some still photos as well. So there we have it. Not the best video quality, certainly not in 2024, but still such an interesting device. And this camera button really does mean that you can take photos and videos in kind of a selfie mode, unlike devices now, which a lot of the time don't have this button. But the autofocus is terrible, and so you're never really going to get very good photos. So with that in mind, what else can we do with this device in 2024? Well, one thing is that actually it still connects to mobile networks just fine. It is worth pointing out that this only is a 3G device, and actually 3G is being shut off very soon in the UK, depending on the provider. So it might not work for much longer. I'm with Sky and my SIM card is working. However, I can't seem to get mobile data to work. I had to manually enter the APN details and it's still not working. But I can send texts and I can receive calls. So I guess arguably you could still use it as a dumb phone if you really wanted to. Battery life isn't great. This is an original battery in here, so it's going to drain quickly. You definitely want to get a new battery. Other than that, well, if we have a look, we should be able to connect to the Wi-Fi, and this does support, what would be called Wi-Fi 5 backdated. So because it's all backwards compatible, it connects to my Wi-Fi network just fine, and you have full internet access. However, because again the operating system is so old, the SSL cert encryptions that it knows are all out of date. So very few websites are going to work over HTTPS, if at all. It doesn't know about modern SSL standards. You can go to non-secure websites, things like the non-secure version of Google. It does still work, and you can kind of try things out. There is the on-screen keyboard, which, to be honest, works quite well, and this would be definitely an argument for not bothering using the built-in. We're even at a point where the typing is not too bad. It's a little laggy, but you can definitely do it. And in many ways, it was actually better of an experience than trying to use the tiny keys. The only thing that really benefited was the fact that if you were using the on-screen keyboard, you were taking up a lot of screen space. It does also seem like a lot of these buttons are kind of unresponsive. They've aged pretty badly, but obviously that wasn't a problem at the time. So yeah, you're definitely in a place where I would say even in 2010, using the on-screen keyboard was probably a good, if not better, of an experience. It just meant it took up a lot of your screen real estate. It was definitely an idea of being able to do emails and important business stuff. Was it very good at that? No, I don't think so at all. So there you have it. You can kind of access the internet still on it, but the screen's so small and the input for text is so bad, I would say no one wants to be doing that at all. So what else do we have? Well, as I mentioned before, the App Store is completely out of the question. You could sideload any apps that do still support such an old operating system. They're going to be few and far between. Some of the apps that are built in are going to still work. For example, we do find that actually Google Maps does still work. There we go, it does actually still load in. You can actually still use the GPS. You can kind of zoom in and also get directions and that sort of thing. So it does still function very rudimentarily as a GPS device, but I guess again that's kind of something you could use it for. But a lot of internet requiring apps just don't work anymore. For example, obviously Twitter, that just takes you to sign in, but then will fail if you try and sign in. I'm pretty sure you get the same sort of experience with a lot of other apps, and all the signing in required Google apps just don't work either. So what else? Well, this is the thing, and this is my problem with devices of this age. There really isn't a whole lot you can do. You could use it as a basic MP3 player with that micro SD card support, and there are a few other apps built in. Tita was always quite a fun game that demonstrated the accelerometer in the device. That was always quite a big thing, which meant you could kind of roll the device to move the ball around. That was kind of fun. So if you wanted a dedicated device for that, I guess you could do that as well. But that fundamentally is the issue with devices in the internet age. As they get old, they become almost useless. We've entered this era where everything requires the internet, and everything requires an up-to-date internet connection, requires access to specific servers, and all these sorts of things. And it's very unfortunate because it means that the hardware is rendered useless. At some point, the phone that you carry around with you today will become useless. You will be not able to do anything with it whatsoever. Even if I want to maybe unlock this and flash a new ROM or something like that, a lot of HTC devices required going to a website to unlock the bootloader. And I think that process is long gone as well. So there's a lot of problems with this age of hardware. It's new enough that it's dependent on the internet, but it's old and there is nothing you can do with it other than use it as a nice paperweight, essentially. And that's a real shame because there are a lot of completely capable pieces of hardware out there that are just going to landfill because you can't do anything with them. Sure, it's only got an 800 megahertz processor, but that's still quite a lot of computing power. You could do something with that. But because of the limitations of the software, it's just not possible. And I really believe that we're going to see a lot more of that in the years to come. A lot more hardware devices that are dependent on specific software and internet connections that render them useless otherwise. It's a shame because we can look back to the 90s, the 80s, and that era of computing where those devices, they still work today. They still work perfectly well as long as the hardware hasn't malfunctioned, uh, and the capacitors haven't blown up. They still function exactly as they meant to, and we're just going to miss that. We're not going to have that anymore. We're not going to be able to have that longevity of hardware. So it's a real shame. But still, it's been a lot of fun looking back at this device. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We're still a very small channel and every single subscription helps. But thank you very much for watching till the very end, and I will see you again next time. Bye for now.